We continue the second phase in creating the framework of the upper denture. I worked 1 more hour since our last presentation to finalize the saddles, and now we'll do the clasps. In the first quadrant we have an acres and the 4 arms clasps. Both are round, opened dentally, that means towards the pillars, towards the teeth that neighbor the dental space. So both clasps are recommended in lateral edentations. We start the acres, called with 3 arms, also called the clasp with 3 arms. We use a prefabricated element for its free part, free portion, and so I place this element into the position. It's again is prefabricated wax. Here is the body from which the 3 elements will start. And so I unite this body of the clasp, as it is called, to the pattern of the main connector and of the saddles. This is actually a secondary connector. This is a zone that has to be very, very strongly reinforced. The thickness should be like 2-3 millimeters and up to 5 millimeters wide if it is possible. As you can see, the link is massive. Now I create the rest that will give the tooth rest and will stabilize the whole denture by not allowing it to sink into the gums, into the gingiva. For the counter clasp, as we call it, this will be included in the lingual bar. Actually, it's a palatal one, but it's similar with the lingual one from the mandible. I have already created it. It's semi-oval, half oval. So oval on the outside, as we look at it, it's like 2-3 millimeters thickness. It depends how thick how big the teeth are on which it sits, and the thickness is around 1 millimeter. All the connections that I'm doing are rounded. I try to use as little space as possible, otherwise it will cause problems in aesthetics, but in the same time I need maximum resistance. So that's the tricky part. I don't want to get beyond the palatal half of the frontal teeth, precisely for aesthetic reasons, right? So when I'm doing this secondary connector, I have to be very careful till where I can extend the wax. The very important factor is to understand that secondary connectors, they don't have contact with the mucosa, with the periodontium. They have to be at a distance from the gums, right? All those zones are rounded, curved, the functions of the clasps are several functions. There are several functions, multiple functions. The active part, like this one, they help maintain the denture in the mouth. The rests, they ensure the stability, avoiding movements, lateral movements as well, and stability in the sense that it will not sink into the gum. All those parts of the clasp must be passive once the denture is fully inserted. They don't have to press on the teeth in any way. So now I clean thoroughly the active part once it has been fixed, actually glued, as I can say so, if I could say so, with wax in place. I can allow it to be a little bit longer there, and then I will trim it once it becomes metal, once I cast it. I can then shorten it as much as I wish. So I do it a little bit longer just to make sure that it won't be short. The forearms clasp is recommended on molars and lateral indentations when the molars are alone. So it's similar to Acker's, but there is one more rest and one more secondary connector. This also has to be at a distance from the mucosa, around 1 millimeter. So that's why we placed a foil when we created the modified model from which we derived by impression this duplicate model. Now in the second quadrant we have a device, split clasp, split in the form of letter T. This is recommended in terminal edentations. Terminal, we call it when there is no teeth remaining distally from the edentulous zone. So it is highly elastic. It not only helps to maintain the denture in the mouth, but does not allow the sinking of the denture into the gum, nor a movement of dislodging of the denture. So I'm being very careful to place the active part under the equator. See, while the wax is still hot, warm enough, I apply it there. The intermediate part of the clasp as well should not be in contact with the mucosa. So that region has been foliated before, right? Before casting this duplicate model. It's very similar to what we did at the with the clasps, wire clasps from the acrylic partial denture. Those clasps, in contrast to the wire ones, are much more rigid, obviously. They're way thicker, you can only activate them in one direction. So I have to place them in a very, very exact position. They can only be activated in labial, oral, or labial palatal direction. They are so thick. The problem is that they can erode the enamel, and they are non-hygienic because they retain food. If they will break, it's almost impossible, if at all, to fix, to solder back. So generally they are replaced with wire clasps, which is not the ideal, but that's what is done usually, if they break again. This is the rest. We have to make sure it's not too high. If it is, then it will we will have premature contacts in occlusion. For the secondary connector, we need like 2-3 millimeters thickness, and that's why I use a spur, a wax spur, 2.5 millimeters thickness. So being calibrated to this thickness, I know exactly the thickness of my connector, that my connector will have. Well, if it goes away, you have to place it back. This may happen at times. So the connector is connected, so to say, to the metal part, that the part that will be fixed on the pallet, will sit on the pallet. Now we have a dental band. This is the dental bar. That's one thing, the lingual bar. And this is dental band. That's a different thing. A band like this is 2 millimeters thick, wide, and 1 millimeter thickness. I can use a spur as well, 2.5, and cut it in two. See, now I know exactly the thickness and the width. That's exactly the dimension I need. 2 millimeters and 1 millimeter thickness, 2 wide and 1 thick. I make it a little bit longer. Now I warm it up with my hands, and I warm it a little bit more in the flame, and I want to keep the profile oval on the outside. So when I press it, I take care not to modify the outer profile, which is oval, half oval. And here is what it looks into position. I take the excesses away, the parts that I don't need. I unite it to the secondary connectors. So this is the teeth band. Everything has to be rounded there. I try to have like 2 millimeters at this junction. Now I will smoothen everything and create precise exact margins of my model. So that's the refining process of my band actually. As we can see, the band is situated above the zone that I have of which I have covered the undercuts. So it's above the equator. So this will create a functional block of the 3 teeth, all 3 of them. It can go, this band can go from 2 to 8 teeth, or elements as we call them. Depending on the occlusion of the patient. Sometimes they may cause trouble in occlusion. That's another problem that we're having. I mean the main one, to tell the truth. Especially there, you see on the cingulum of the lateral incisor, canine. I try to follow the profile of the teeth. I don't want to make it too thin, the band. Better to trim and remove when everything became metal. So after the casting. I want to do the refinishing of the rest as well. Again, this is a point where I can have problems in occlusion. If the preparation is not, if the preparation is thick enough, I can replicate the shape of the fossas, replicate the natural anatomy, but that supposes that the preparation the dentist has done before is deep enough to allow me to replicate the real anatomy, right? When I model this this rest. I need to make sure that everything is smooth and that I filled all little gaps that can occur there in between the different wax elements. Now the refinishing of the intermediate element of the clasp. The more we do now, the less we'll have to do when after casting. Now we do it easily in wax. After casting is going to be harder because it's in metal. And that's the framework.